Deep in the scorching red centre of the Australian outback, there is a town where the people literally live underground. The surface is a sun-blasted wasteland of dirt mounds and abandoned mining shafts. Down below, they have carved living rooms, churches and hotels straight into the bedrock. Let that sink in for a second. In a country currently paralysed by a suffocating housing crisis, where a single-fronted terrace in Sydney or Melbourne will routinely sell for over $1.5 million, there is a parallel reality. There are entire towns across the vast Australian continent where property is practically given away. Places where you can buy a solid house on a massive block of land for less than the price of a used Toyota Hilux. But this is not a real estate loophole. It is a symptom of something much darker. Today, we are looking at 20 towns in Australia where home prices are so absurdly low, you will think it's a scam. But the real scam was played on the people who built these outposts. These are the towns that dug the gold, sheared the sheep, laid the rails, and bled the earth dry to build the modern Australian economy, only to be left to die in the dust when the corporate math stopped making sense. And the story behind number 1 on our list is going to challenge your understanding of what a government can legally do to its own citizens. Number 20. Peterborough, South Australia. We start our journey at the crossroads of the continent. For a century, Peterborough was one of the most important railway hubs in Australia. 3 different railway gauges met here, meaning every train crossing the country had to stop, unload, and switch tracks. It required a massive workforce. And the town grew wealthy, building grand hotels and stunning stone architecture. But progress is ruthless. In the late 20th century, the rail lines were standardised. The trains no longer had to stop. Almost overnight, the entire economic purpose of the town evaporated. Today, the massive rail yards sit rusting in the sun. You can buy a beautiful, historic home here for under $150,000. But you are buying into a town whose heartbeat was permanently bypassed by modern efficiency. Number 19. Uyen, Victoria. Deep in the Mallee region, Uyen was built on the back of the great Australian agricultural dream. It was a thriving wheat and sheep farming centre. But the Australian climate is unforgiving, and decades of relentless droughts, shifting global agricultural markets, and the consolidation of family farms into massive corporate holdings systematically drained the population. Walking down the main street today is a masterclass in rural decline. Grand, some heritage-listed pubs sit mostly empty, and shop fronts are permanently boarded up. You can find solid brick homes here for $130,000. It is a quiet, sun-baked monument to a farming boom that the climate simply refused to sustain. Number 18. Maryborough, Victoria. During the Victorian gold rush of the 1850s, Maryborough was so wealthy that the town planners genuinely believed it would become the capital city of Australia. They built infrastructure on an absolutely staggering scale, including a palatial, jaw-dropping railway station that Mark Twain famously described as a railway station with a town attached. But the gold ran out, and the capital was built elsewhere. Today, Maryborough is a beautiful but economically stagnant town, caught in a permanent state of suspended animation. It has all the grand architecture of a major metropolis, but homes frequently sell for a fraction of the state average, often dipping around the $300,000 mark. And it is a wealthy facade masking a slow, generational decline. Number 17. Bourke, New South Wales. In Australian folklore, there is a phrase, "back a Bourke." It means the absolute edge of the known world. For over a century, Bourke was a booming river port and agricultural powerhouse on the Darling River. But decades of upstream water mismanagement and corporate irrigation have choked the river system. The water stopped flowing. The paddle steamers rotted away. Today, Bourke struggles with extreme heat, social isolation, and declining infrastructure. You can buy houses here for under $100,000, but you are buying into a community on the absolute front lines of Australia's water crisis, fighting simply to keep the dust at bay. Number 16. Mount Morgan, Queensland. For decades, Mount Morgan was one of the richest gold mines on the planet. The wealth extracted from this single mountain helped fund the entire development of Queensland. All but when the mining company finally packed up and left in 1990, they left behind a catastrophic environmental disaster. The mine is now a massive, highly toxic, acidic crater lake that threatens the local river system every time there is heavy rain. The town is left to deal with the poisoned legacy. You can buy a traditional Queenslander home here for $150,000, but the price reflects the reality of living in the shadow of a ticking environmental time bomb. Number 15. Norseman, on Western Australia. Sitting at the very edge of the vast, treeless Nullarbor Plain, Norseman is the last stop before 1,000 kilometres of nothingness. It was built entirely on a massive gold reef. When the gold prices fluctuated and the deep shafts became too expensive to run, the town bled residents. Today, it operates mostly as a fleeting highway stop for weary travellers. You can buy a house here for $80,000. It is a town clinging to the edge of the highway, waiting for a mining resurgence that may never actually arrive. Number 14. Kambalda, Western Australia. Here is where the concept of cheap real estate intersects with corporate control. Kambalda was built in the 1960s by the Western Mining Corporation to house workers for the booming nickel mines. It was a perfect, planned company town. But the nickel market is notoriously volatile. In the early 2000s, the company decided it no longer wanted to be a landlord. They sold the town off, practically overnight. Then, as mines went into care and maintenance, the workforce switched to fly in, fly out. The permanent population crashed. Today, you can find duplexes and homes for $120,000, remnants of a corporate utopia that was simply discarded when the spreadsheet math changed. Number 13. Coolgardie, Western Australia. They call it the mother of the goldfields. In 1892, gold was struck, and Coolgardie exploded into the third largest town in Western Australia. And it had multiple newspapers, massive hotels, and a stock exchange. Then, the surface gold simply vanished. The population abandoned the town almost as quickly as they arrived, moving to richer strikes further east. Today, Coolgardie is a ghost of its former self. You drive down a main street wide enough to turn a camel train, flanked by magnificent, empty stone buildings. You can buy property here for well under $200,000. It is the ultimate testament to the fleeting, ruthless nature of a gold rush. Number 12. Charleville, Queensland. Deep in the outback, Charleville is a town defined by isolation and extreme weather. It is a major hub for the surrounding cattle stations, but it is notoriously vulnerable to devastating, catastrophic flooding from the Warrego River. When you combine extreme outback isolation with the constant looming threat of having your living room put underwater, property values plummet. You can buy homes here for $120,000. Endicant, the people who stay are incredibly resilient, but the real estate market reflects the harsh, unforgiving reality of living at the mercy of the Australian climate. Number 11. Tara, Queensland. This is where the dream of cheap land takes a desperate turn. Decades ago, developers subdivided massive tracts of harsh, uncleared bushland outside of Tara and sold them off as cheap lifestyle blocks. Today, you can buy a sprawling block of land here for $20,000. But there is a massive catch. And there is no town water, no sewage, and often no electricity. It has become a haven for people completely priced out of modern Australia, retreating to live off-grid in shacks and caravans. The cheap price tag hides a landscape of extreme rural poverty and total isolation from basic social services. Number 10. Broken Hill, New South Wales. Known as the Silver City, Broken Hill is arguably the most famous mining town in Australian history. The ore body here was so massive, it spawned BHP at one of the largest mining corporations on Earth. But the city peaked in the 1960s with a population of 30,000. As automation replaced miners, the population literally halved. Today, Broken Hill is a stunningly beautiful oasis of heritage architecture, sitting alone in the red dirt. But it is a city built for twice as many people as currently live there. You can buy classic miners' cottages for under $150,000. It is a city slowly managing its own magnificent decline. Number 9. Zeehan. Tasmania perpetuates the freezing, impenetrable rainforests of Tasmania's west coast. Zeehan was once known as the Silver City of the South. In the 1890s, it had a population of 10,000 people and an opera house that hosted international performers. When the silver market crashed, the town was instantly swallowed back by the jungle. Today, the population is under 1,000. The main street is a surreal mix of grand, decaying ruins and quiet homes. Property here frequently sells for under $200,000. It is a town that fought a war against the Tasmanian wilderness, and the wilderness won. Number 8. Queenstown, Tasmania. Just down the road from Zeehan is Queenstown, a place that looks like it belongs on another planet. For a century, the copper smelters rained sulfur down on the surrounding mountains, killing every piece of vegetation and bleaching the rocks a glowing, radioactive orange. It was a brutal, toxic, and highly profitable company town. As the mining slowed, the money evaporated. You can buy historic homes in this surreal, moon-like valley for around $150,000. The town is slowly pivoting to tourism, but the incredibly cheap housing is a direct result of a century of total environmental devastation. Number 7. Rosebery, Tasmania. Rounding out the Tasmanian mining trio is Rosebery. Tucked at the bottom of a steep, heavily forested gorge, and it is completely dominated by the massive zinc mine that operates right in the middle of town. Rosebery is dark, wet, and utterly isolated. When you buy a house here for $130,000, you are buying into a town where the heavy machinery rattles your windows, and the shadow of the mountain blocks the sun for half the day. It exists for one singular industrial purpose, and when that purpose ends, the town will likely follow. Number 6. Andamooka, South Australia. And if you want to see what a town looks like with absolutely no rules, visit Andamooka. Born out of a frantic opal rush, it was never officially planned. There are no paved roads, no property boundaries, and, for a long time, no central power grid. People just arrived, dug a hole, and built chaotic shacks out of whatever scrap metal and rock they could find. It is a Mad Max movie come to life. You can buy a miner's shack here for $40,000, but you are not really buying real estate. And you are buying a chaotic, lawless piece of outback history that defies every modern building code in existence. Number 5. Coober Pedy, South Australia. As we mentioned at the start, Coober Pedy is the opal capital of the world, but the surface temperatures regularly exceed 50 degrees Celsius. It is a landscape so hostile that the residents had to retreat underground just to survive. As the opal industry has severely declined, the town has hollowed out. Yet you can buy an underground dugout home here for $80,000. It is incredibly cheap, but you have to be willing to live in a windowless cave, in one of the most remote and scorching deserts on the planet, in a town slowly fading back into the dust. Number 4. Gwalia, Western Australia. Now we enter the realm of the truly abandoned. Gwalia was a massive gold mine managed by Herbert Hoover before he became the President of the United States. It was a thriving, bustling settlement. Then, 3 days before Christmas in 1963, the mine suddenly closed. By New Year's Day, the entire population had packed up and left on a special train. They just walked away. You cannot buy the rotting timber houses of the Gwalia ghost town, but right next door, in the surviving town of Leonora, you can buy homes for $60,000. You get cheap housing, but your next-door neighbour is an eerie, perfectly preserved monument to sudden, total abandonment. Number 3. Radium Hill, South Australia. And this town takes the concept of abandonment and makes it lethal. Radium Hill was established in the 1950s as a uranium mine. It was a fully functioning town with hundreds of residents, schools, and a hospital. But in 1961, the uranium grade dropped, and the government pulled the plug. But they didn't just abandon the town. Because of the radioactive contamination, they practically buried it. They bulldozed the buildings and filled in the mine shafts. You cannot buy a house here. The real estate value is zero. It is a chilling example of a town created for the Cold War and erased when it became too toxic to exist. Number 2. Shay Gap, Western Australia. Shay Gap was supposed to be the future. Built in the 1970s by a massive iron ore corporation, it was a utopian, futuristic town built in the remote Pilbara region. The houses were designed like modular spaceships, clustered together to block the extreme heat. But company towns are dictatorships. So when the iron ore ran out in 1993, the company didn't just ask people to leave. They brought in the bulldozers, dismantled every single house, ripped up the roads, and planted native grass over the ruins. Shay Gap was entirely wiped off the map. It proves that no matter how beautiful a community is, if a corporation owns the land, your home only exists at their absolute mercy. And finally, number 1. Wittenoom, Western Australia. This is the ultimate, devastating scam. In the mid-20th century, Wittenoom was a booming, idyllic town in the stunning Pilbara Gorges. The company actively encouraged families to move there, promising high wages and a beautiful outback lifestyle. What they didn't tell them was that the blue asbestos they were mining was a death sentence. The toxic dust coated the town. Children played in it like snow. Thousands of workers and their families died from mesothelioma in one of the worst industrial disasters in history. And the government's response wasn't just to close the mine. They de-gazetted the town. They physically removed it from official maps. They cut the power, removed the road signs, and made it legally a contaminated wasteland. Today, you cannot buy a house in Wittenoom for a single dollar. It is illegal to even enter. The town is a poisoned, ghosted memorial to corporate greed, a place where the pursuit of cheap building materials cost thousands of people their lives. These numbers, the $40,000 shacks, the $100,000 heritage homes, they might sound like a dream to a generation locked out of the Australian housing market. But a house is only ever as valuable as the economy that sustains it. These 20 towns tell a unified, brutal story of the Australian continent. We build immense, wealthy communities to extract gold, iron, copper, and wheat. But the land is harsh, the climate is unforgiving, and when the corporate spreadsheet no longer shows a profit, the capital simply packs up and leaves. The media looks away, the government shrugs, and the people are left behind in homes that slowly lose their value, their purpose, and their future. The real scam isn't the price of the house. The scam is the promise that the industries that built these towns actually cared about the people living in them. And this is not ancient history. It is happening right now.